All right, we should be live. What's going on, everybody? We're rolling low tech today because Google's having some internal problems and the encoder isn't working properly. So hopefully everyone can see this. I'm joined today by Mr. Fahrenheit, and we're going to be talking about the MGTOW movement because I did a video on it yesterday, which was a lot of fun. And I'm going to go over my thought process and how I come to the conclusions that I come to. Someone asked what's the pathology behind what I believe in? And to really understand that, you have to start from first principles. So that's what we're going to do today. So welcome to the show, Mr. Fahrenheit. You there? Got to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just letting you do your thing, man.
No, it's fine. I wanted you to hop right in so we can talk about this. I want to see what your perspective is on these axioms.
Well, yeah, the MGTOW, like we were just talking about, it's highly a nihilistic and borderline like suicidal in a suicidal in a societal sense of like that sort of ideology. It's completely will lead to the extinction of anyone who tries to get it as the main framework of how a society should operate.
Right. It's a defeatist attitude. That's essentially what it is. Hey, welcome, Tatoes. You finally got
Hello,
in.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
Well, yeah, it is defeatist, but it's more than that. What happens is they tend to use the whole biological argument, and what I guess what they don't realize is that yes, humans are a biological creature, but we're not slaves to our biological imperatives. We have a fucking thinking mind for a reason. That's what separates us from the common animal.
Well, in some sense, yes, but in other senses, no. We have one biological imperative above all others that defines exactly what we have to do in life. Taters, you might want to mute yourself if you're not talking.
Yeah.
No worries. Because in all life forms, we have, in all visible life forms, what we call life, the one thing that they all have in common is that they have the motivation in some form to procreate. And whether that motivation is in the human form, which is just thinking it through logically or using reason, in most animals, it's just a chemical reaction or something like that that drives them forward. So we are, in essence, slaves to that, unfortunately.
Yes, but they make the argument that women are hypergamous and they'll fucking throw you under the bus as soon as they can if they get a better option, which to a certain extent is true. But they I guess what they don't want to realize is that that sort of um what's the I don't know
Worldview?
what I'm looking for, but that sort of belief, I guess, is highly cancerous because women, especially in the modern day, a lot of them don't want to breed and they replace themselves with fucking becoming dog moms and stuff like that. So they've been conditioned out of this instinct to breed.
Right. And the thing is, okay, so to clarify a couple of things about MGTOW, because I know I sound hostile to it, and I am hostile to it because I think it's a toxic philosophy. But the main thing that we have to get out of the way is that most of their descriptive ideas about how the world works and how things are, what the reality is correct. Yes, women are hypergamous. We live in a feminized society. All of that I agree with, perfectly valid. The big thing I have a problem with is the solutions to these problems that the MGTOWs represent. Their solutions, I think, are cancerous to society as a whole. We have different values as far as that is concerned.
Right.
And like Rufio Boof says here in the chat, how you doing, man? I don't understand the MGTOW end game, and there isn't one. The end game is,
Well, some of them have pre-described endgame, but their way of getting it there, it's like they believe collapse is coming soon, or they believe that waiting for the collapse and trying to build a better system after it is the only way for it to work. So they have kind of like the siege moral view, like you can't change the system from within, so you have to wait for it to be really weak or to collapse before you can do anything about it. That's some of the more dominant figures at least have said. and
Right.
other
And
people seem
I've been
to
around
agree
this.
with it.
Right. I've been around this for a while, the red pill community, the men's rights community, because that's one of the things that when a couple of years ago, when this skeptic community first really took popularity, a lot of it did tie into this red pill or MRA philosophy. So I was around that quite a bit. Um, but yeah, it's like bunker nationalism, basically just waiting for the collapse, build yourself up, which is fine. You should self improve, obviously. But if you think that society is just going to crumble around you and then all of a sudden all the good men are just going to make a whole new society, you're wrong. Power, as far as state power and social power is concerned, is like energy. You can't create it, you can't destroy it, but you can only transform it in some way, shape, or form. There are people who are more motivated than the MGTOWs who are going to take that institutional power and shape it however they want to. That's how we got in this mess in the first place. So the solution is to not sit back and let them play their games and let society collapse. The best thing you can do is co-opt and try and take this power for yourself. That's what men used to do, and that's what men should do.
I think a lot of them have the problem with the way and how fast the world is changing. They can't formulate plans fast enough in correlation to the change happening. And some of them have the dream world of, oh, when the sex bots come out and the artificial womb will be there, all the power that women have now will disappear. Which is kind of pipe dream, because the power women have is in the vote they give to the parties. So I think that belief of some of them is faulty at the core itself.
Well, if you allow women to take complete control of democracy, they're just going to outright ban those things, right? So you run that risk very highly. I mean, they're already talking about that now. How many, when the whole Japan is producing like these absurd sex robots, and what do the feminists say? Well, oh, who's going to cook and clean for you now? It's like they're trying to get back into their roles, but also if
they
that
don't
kind
even
of
do that right now.
yeah, the only
It's
thing.
the meme. It's the meme of the like woman's. It's a picture of a sex doll. Then you have the picture of is it the Will Smith movie I, Robot, or whatever it's called? You just have a picture of a blue-haired feminist on top of the robot. Will it or no, Will Smith with a blue hair? Will it cook for you? Will it do this, all those traditional things the women supposedly do, and the robot is just like, do you?
Yeah.
It's turning into the same thing, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, let's see here. Chili Mace says the alt-right just hates women. Is that a quote from JF? I don't know, but that's not what this is about. And this is where the MGTOW also take things a bit too far. A lot of it turns to just blanket hatred of all women, which is really what where incel culture comes from, which is wrong. You don't hate an animal for being the way that it is. That's just how it was created. It can't help but act in its own nature, and that's how I see women. They just can't help it. It's just how they operate.
Yes, but
Right.
a lot of the Mictos, they were raised in the egalitarian culture of the West. They were raised to believe in those things as the core of the humanity, or being human, let's say. And now they have a problem with rejecting it. And when they start understanding, no, it isn't really that way, they are in the so-called red pill rage phase, where they are just angry at all the things they have been taught, and a lot of them just seem to decide to go deep in it and just swim in it into forever. They don't move away from it past, like in the 5 stages of grief, they don't move past anger to something more productive. They just are stuck in those anger pits, and they don't do anything else other than training, getting money, and getting some one night stands.
Right. And this is the thing, right? So uh, I don't disagree. Like I said in the video, I don't disagree. There's a lot of injustice out there. The problem is, what are you doing to change it? The only thing that MGTOWs do by not engaging in relationships, by not empowering high quality women, by not having good quality children, is that they are just perpetuating that exact same cycle, because the weak men are actually producing offspring while they're off in the gym or off at their job or off buying nice things. they're the ones that are producing the next generation. And we'll get into that when I go over the traditionalism from first principle, but you are part of the problem if you're not doing anything to change it.
Well, yeah, I would argue that the guy said apparently the alt-right hates women. I'd argue that the traditional right, which would be a sub ideology inside the umbrella that is the alt-right, is the only sort of people who follow that creed are the only ones that truly love women, because they like MGTOWs, they understand women at a biological level, but at the same time they also aren't going to fucking throw them in the goddamn trash.
Right. And the thing is, when you talk about love, most people interpret that from a liberal meaning, to say that you put someone on a pedestal. To love someone
Male
is
mother
to
need
not,
is what they
right. It's not, in our terms, is to not put women on a pedestal. It is to recognize our mutually beneficial relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it, both these groups, the traditional right or the MGTOW, they are red pilled at varying degrees, but the normies, the blue pilled men out there that you guys were just talking about, they don't their love is a false love. It's a miasmic feeling that they can't even explain what it is. They just chase it for the urge of getting a sexual release. That's about all it is. They have no grandiose or bigger ideal behind it other than that. They're fulfilling their like main biological goal of just busting a nut.
Oh, and they are a lot of men nowadays. They learn what quote and unquote love is from media tools that are basically presenting everything in the way women see them as.
Well,
So-
that's exactly right. So they see love from a woman's perspective, which is to put things on a pedestal.
Yes, a lot of them, they just want to find a woman to give money to put in a house so they can have their kids. And that's what a lot of people can agree with this, let's say, conservative, like Republicans, I would think. But that model doesn't simply work. It has, with the way the current law system is, which is like one of the major points in which we acknowledge, it just doesn't work.
Right. Well, it's a huge mess, and I made some. I responded to the in the last video. I responded to the comments that I thought were worth responding to, because a lot of it seems from the more radical MGTOWs that the only thing they have are insults and ad homs like trad cuck, or you're a trad feminist, or something ridiculous like that. And it's like, that's not an argument. First of all, I took the time to respond point by point to your comment, and I expect something like that in return. But some of it is just so off the wall, so off kilter. I'm not even sure how to approach it, really. So that's why this morning I created this document that is my traditional axioms. Why do I think the way I think? And I will hopefully get not only y'all's opinion, but the opinion of the chat. So we're going to go through this one by one. It's only 9 points with some subsections to it, and I've expanded upon each one. So we'll see exactly what that entails.
You didn't make 88 precepts of Mimmerhead? Come on.
I should. I should.
Go for nice numbers like that.
I got a comment from Cato this morning. What was it? The Dark Age of Tolerance should be trademarked. And I thought, man, I should write a book with that title, The Dark Age of Tolerance. It'd be like a Warhammer 40K novel. That's what it sounds like. The Dark Age of Tolerance.
As long as it isn't too long, I will read it.
It's going to be 1,488 pages long, of course.
Why not 114.8 pages long?
How do you do
Come
a
on.
0.8?
You cut a bit of a page in the end. I am what do they call it on Fortune? I am a brainlet. Come on.
Yeah.
I haven't read for a couple of years. I'm just getting back.
Yeah, I'm reading the chat here. Some great comments, everybody. Thanks for all the comments.
Let's see what people are saying.
I can send you the link if anybody wants. But anyway,
I have it opened in the other browser.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I love having the chat on my second monitor. So, okay, let's start from the starting principle. What is the baseline of our existence? And for me, I haven't given it, years and years worth of thought. But if someone asked me at the current moment, I would say that nature necessitates the creation of offspring for a species to survive. And to expand on that, survival is good from my perspective. I enjoy being alive. And if we disagree with that precept, there's not a whole lot we can do to change it. If you don't value being alive, then as far as I'm concerned, the logical conclusion is suicide. And if you interfere with other people's affairs in this regard, that is to say, people being alive, that would make you a murderer. And those of us who do value life seek to remove murderers and other undesirables from society. This would also branch into a conversation about nihilism. What do you guys think?
Would you like to start?
Sorry, my too big brain for you guys. I'm sorry, I'll slow it down.
Well, I wasn't paying attention. I was reading Eros and the Mysteries of Love, getting ready for this. But
Come on, you can't beat devil, can you?
yeah, if you don't value being alive, there isn't really much that anyone can say or do that would convince you otherwise. It would have to come from within, and most people, I don't think, have the ability to psychoanalyze themselves to that point where they can completely alter their mindset. So yeah, if you're not willing to embrace the struggle of living, then I don't see any point in trying to deal with you, is my perspective.
Right, and that's where this whole conversation begins. Do you value being alive? If you don't even value that, then this conversation is not one that we can have between us, because the whole rest of the principles rely on the fact that you enjoy being alive. So, moving on, number 2, evolution and natural selection are real. Those who procreate determine the future of the species. And to expand on that, those who procreate successfully survive and determine the future of the species. However, at the onset, the bare minimum required to be alive is to, be born. Whether you think you will be successful at procreation, this is not including variables such as economic status, mental health, etc., or not, in order for evolution to take place, there must be procreation or replication first.
Right. Well, the Jews took that to the maximum efficiency. The rabbis and the lawyers and the doctors, the big brained elite of their society, were the ones that were paid to reproduce and have 8 children.
Killing children. Well, they do kill Palestinians.
but yeah, and slowly over time, I mean, they went up 10 to 15 IQ points in the course of 2 or 3 generations, just because of how much reproduction was happening with the elites of their society. So yeah, voluntary eugenics is an actual thing.
Yeah, I use the phrase soft eugenics. Me and Jay have disagreed on that phrase, but I think that's an apt phrase for it. The natural state of how we replicate ourselves, if we just allow people to make decisions on who they mate with and the sort of life decisions that they take, how well they maintain themselves, it all kind of sorts itself out eventually, and humans are very good at adapting. But the main purpose of this principle is that evolution is real, natural selection happens. That is something that we have to accept. And the survival of the species, because again, the starting point was we value life. In order for life to continue, you have to procreate. Life is finite. There is no infinite. Humans are mortal, essentially. So you don't last forever. The only way that you can further the species, if you value life, is to procreate.
Right.
We have rejected pretty much evolution in the modern West, haven't we?
Well,
Yeah, I would say
no
so.
matter what you do, you will survive, and you will even get paid for just to live. Like if you look at, I am currently in Denmark. Let's look at their system. Almost no matter what you do, you'll be taken care of
Exactly,
So
it's dysgenic.
yeah, exactly. The survival of the fittest is currently against the popular mode of thinking in the West, and that's one of the things we are targeted kind of, but not directly enough. I think that's the point you're having there is excellent for where we find ourselves at.
Well, yeah, we're basically subsidizing the
We are
lower
subsidizing the
class.
Idiocracy movie.
That's exactly
Exactly.
it.
That movie is becoming real. It's so sad.
I mean, even back in the day, it was the kings and the lords who would have the most children. And now it's like we're subsidizing the lower class to reproduce while simultaneously allowing in low IQ immigrants. So
Well,
that's why the West is having an IQ drop.
I partially disagree. The lords and kings themselves didn't have that many more kids. Their kids just lived longer.
Well, yeah,
Sometimes,
Plebs
yeah.
had
and
so many
they
more.
also had the ability to reproduce, which
Yeah,
I
they had
mean,
food.
your common farmer would have like what 6 to 10 kids, but how many of them would make it to adulthood?
Yeah, depends how fast the wife died of childbirth. Usually they try to get like 10 kids per wife, and as soon as the wife died, okay, it's time to have another baby factory.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's a harsh reality for feminists to accept, but that's the natural order of things, and it benefits everybody to engage in that system. We'll get to that. That's a little bit further down the list. In the Discord, in the general chat, I've posted the 9 axioms that we're working with here. I haven't posted the expanded stuff I wrote beneath it, but we'll go through that right now. So let's look at the chat here for a second. MGTOWs are whiny hennies, mommy issues, men are awesome. Thank you very much, Mar Eden.
We mentioned it a bit earlier before we had this call. A lot of them seem to come from single mom households. So the lack of the paternal figure skewed their view on everything because they were taught how the world is by the woman, and they don't have the most accurate view of the world, can we say, I think.
I'm just getting a message here. Okay, so yeah, basically we're running into the problem of dysgenics in the West, and that's the primary issue with MGTOW is that you have so many great men who only exist in part because of their genes, and they're removing those genes from the gene pool, and the dumber, weaker men who can just spit out babies essentially are the ones who are procreating. They're going to get replaced. So now,
that in itself isn't the problem. The problem is we are subsidizing those dumb guys that have 15 kids.
that's another problem. Yeah,
If
I
the
mean,
rich didn't subsidize that, okay, that wasn't the problem in the Middle Ages that the poor had so many more kids because they didn't live. The problem is now the, let's say, less intelligent part of the society has so many kids, but they don't die off.
well, the thing is, the more intelligent and industrialized a society gets, this is another issue, the less children they tend to have. So if we had left our nations closed and everyone just got smarter and smarter and smarter, we wouldn't have a permanent underclass of people who procreate, in multiples of 3 higher than the native population. That's the other issue. This is another reason why overpopulation is happening. But anyway,
The problem is we're getting people from Middle Ages periods, Muslims basically, into the West. So they are still in the mindset, the same with Africans. They need 10 kids so they can farm whatever grain they used to plant.
well, they're
And they
farming the
take,
social security system.
yeah, now it's social security. Like, it's insane in Denmark. You get fast amount of money, I think, per kid you have under 18.
Yep.
So it's good for them to have 3 wives and 20 kids because the dad doesn't have to work. He just drinks all day.
And those programs were designed to encourage birth rates among the native population, but it's expanded to non-natives, which is why people are getting replaced. So the issue with the MGTOWs is that you are not contributing to the advancement of your society in the way that you see it. It's kind of just giving up. Now, there are some, I know this is a common complaint, but there are some MGTOWs who still have children, for some reason. They just don't form really lasting relationships. I'll get there once we get through these principles, but that's a weird situation in and of itself.
Well, a lot of them have kids
What's up,
before they become MGTOWs.
Right,
That's
because they
common,
didn't know the truth.
Yes, they got red pilled by the divorce rape that happened to them.
Right, and as a reaction to that, which the MGTOW movement is entirely reactionary, because of that, they have a certain worldview that they see women as toxic. And it's like, yeah, you got screwed. That doesn't mean everybody's going to get screwed. And what is the alternative if you just sit there and wallow in your self-pity? Well, nothing gets done, nothing changes.
Sargon told us what to do. We need to raise 50 white Uber chads and send them around the world. Don't you know? My guy, don't you know?
Oh, Jesus. So moving on, 3, the offspring of the human species are born weak and defenseless, and it takes between 13 and 18 years to fully mature a single human child. Now, to expand on that, the age varies between genes and culture, all that other different social aspects. From the perspective of a Eurocentrist, as far as I'm concerned, boys start to enter the early stages of manhood at around 7 years old. This is the time in which they need to start being taught by their fathers the way of the world, how war works, the role of men, masculinity, how women work. You just kind of slowly ease them into it. And by the time that they're fully physically matured at 18, now they have a good foundation in which to cultivate a family. And I say 18 because we live in an industrial society. There's no reason for us nowadays to have 5 children by the time we're 20. We can wait a little bit longer. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so
playing with fire, though.
What?
This is
it's playing with fire to wait just a little bit longer, because then you don't know exactly what will happen in the course of your life, and by the time you hit 30 or 40, you might realize, oh shit, I don't have a fucking kid yet.
Exactly. So when
that's what women like. That's when
it happens to men too. Men, we have the ability to reproduce until any age, but I mean, good luck finding a decent woman at that age.
Right. And so the thing is, when you turn 18 years old, you should have good social skills. You should have a social circle of friends. You should be able to gather a mate, and you should start interacting with them. So in 4 years, if you go to college or something like that, you already have a potential mate cultivated, and by the time you're 25, you can start pumping out kids if you're financially stable. That's the whole purpose of that.
Oh, doesn't that kind of assumes you need to be the same age as your partner? That's one of the things that like
I didn't say that.
Yeah, but I kind of I assumed it from what you said that you're one thing I think the West is doing improperly right now. We assume we have to marry with somebody very similar to our age, when when actually, like, statistics show that a bit of an age difference between the man and a woman actually stabilizes the relationship. And the problem is, I thought when is it Fuentes here? I just need the name. The other guy said, "Oh, biologically, yes, men can produce kids as long as they want, but women, first off, after 35, yeah, have fun with Down syndrome."
After 30,
whatever.
I would say.
Yeah,
once you hit 30, it's you.
After 25, the ratios of all the mental diseases that are associated with having kids later grows, and as you said, at 30, after that, it just starts growing insanely fast. That's one of the things that connects the growth of autism in the modern world, is because women have kids after 30, 35. So
right.
All that chase after the career for them, because we want them to be another man, we get a shitload of autists. And it might be fun to read 4chan, but it's not good for the West.
As a high-functioning autist, I find that offensive.
Well, the thing is,
it was kind of a compliment.
so long as you're not getting into creepy pedophile territory. It's fine if there's an age difference of a couple years. I would say probably 3 to 4 maximum if you have to. If you're a 30-year-old man and you still haven't found someone, maybe lower your standards and find someone who's closer to your age. But for the most part, yeah. As far as cognitive function, most human beings, their cognitive function grows until they're about 25, which is about the time that I recommend that you start thinking about having children, because you're fully ready to take on the responsibility of raising another human being successfully at that age, I think.
It's like, I would agree, but the problem is, like, if let's take US for example, can 25-year-olds that have been to college or university really have kids at that age when they are $200,000 in debt and they live with a camper house or a basket bin?
This is assuming that our current generations aren't just dying of debt because of the education system, and
Yes.
Also assuming that college returns to a status symbol where only the best and brightest of men and a very few select women get to attend. So, like I said, it is more of an ideal world, but in general, you need to start thinking about procreation relatively early before you waste all of your valuable years away. So now,
I personally, my personal plans are kind of against that. I want to have kids first when I hit like 35, when I have established a golden goose, so I can have kids and I know I will be able to provide them no matter what.
Well, the thing
and
is,
I will just look for somebody younger.
The thing is, it used to work where you would date someone for 5 years, 6 years, or whatever back in the 60s. Recalling the stories that my grandparents told me, they would court for a couple of years while they were in college. And as soon as they got out of college at the age of 23 or 22, 23, 24, somewhere around there, they would start to have families. That's how it used to work. So you kept your generations relatively close together with one another. But that's fine. If you have a personal, like a different path, we can talk about that some other time. But
I agree on average, the numbers you said, they sound more stable. But like if we're talking like society as a whole.
yeah, on average, these are the ages that you should shoot for. If something comes up and you want to do something differently, if you want to spend your 20s trying to reach the very highest in business or education, fine. But don't forget that you have a duty to create intelligent, high quality children at some point. So now, because human offspring are born weak and defenseless, this goes to principle 3A, subsection. This necessitates that for successful offspring, parents must stay with and raise their children for many years at a time. Now, you could go into the RK selection theory here if you want.
I was going to mention that.
Well, to my estimation, it holds relatively true. Now, whatever label we give it, even if we only understand 1/100th of the implications of what that theory means, doesn't really matter. The truth of the matter is, parents who spend more time with their children produce more successful adults. This is tested.
Yep.
It's been verified. Women who breastfeed and stay in the home as housewives who tend to their children in a positive way produce higher quality children than any other system. Giving up your children to daycare, two-parent working households can work, but you're sacrificing a lot of pair bonding and emotional health with the children. You see this quite frequently. Parents who place their children in daycare for a long, long time and then put them in the public education system, those children grow up to have mental and emotional health problems that need to be resolved by therapy in some way because they did not get the attention that children need at a very young age in order to feel secure in their environments. And that has long-lasting mental effects. And these have all been studied, by the way.
Yeah, Molyneux quite often talks about, or he used to, I haven't listened to him in a while, he used to talk how studies show that women are separated from their kids way too early, and that just wrecks the kid's brain. Because what you see them on 2 hours in the morning, then she's gone for 8, and that shoots chemical mixed through the kid's head as bad as if the child was completely abandoned. Mm-hmm. So the daycares from like when the kid is 1 year old or 6 months old, It just
Exactly.
wrecks the
They
brain.
don't have a concept of time, so when they see their mother just disappearing for and in like any sort of amount of time, it's almost like maternal abandonment.
Exactly.
Yes,
And this is the reason why we have a whole generation of daycare babies that have mental health issues because of this exact thing.
You,
So,
do you, do you mind if I show some of my shitty content?
sure, go ahead.
If anyone's curious, on my channel, I have a video about how to raise children in this day and age. If anyone wants to check it out.
Yeah, in my experience, excuse me, I had two sisters and we're 15 years apart, and I helped raise them.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's a long story, but I helped to raise them, and I learned a lot about how to raise children by watching them grow up and interacting with in their lives, and sort of um, helping to raise them in a lot of ways from a brotherly position. But I think that knowledge still holds true. So that's where I get all of this from. So 3B, another subsection for 3, over time, the most successful humans have been pair bonded long-term mates with an emphasis on the nurturing of offspring, all the things that we just talked about. So, to expand on that, the history of the Western world shows this quite clearly. When men and women have long term mates to rely on, it diffuses all of the problems that life can throw at us. This ensures that each member of the family can be focused on one aspect of biological maintenance at a time. With a stable home environment, that being the woman taking care of children and maintaining the home, men are able to devote more time and energy to the collection of resources. By allowing men to focus on resource collection, women have the ability to survive a harsh world that they are physically incapable of surviving in alone. When these two roles are met, or rules are met, the creation of offspring is more successful. And this is a perfectly natural symbiotic relationship as nature intended.
Well, and
Yeah, there's a. Oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh,
Okay,
there's
you
there's
go ahead.
no, I'm just kidding. There's a theory about that. Up in Northern Europe, especially back hundreds and a couple thousand years ago, it was we all know the harsh winter theory or whatever, but there's an aspect to it that if you were to have a mate that you were courting at the time, you would be stuck inside of a small hut with each other for 6 to 8 months out of the year. So we had to evolve to have a tolerance for each other that the Africans didn't really have. They operated under the whole "it takes a village to raise a child" sort of thing, whereas we had to have the stable, traditional, quote unquote, nuclear family down pat to be able to survive.
Right. They have a more like a more diffused community where everyone it's a lot more communistic, in fact, where there's a lot more communal stuff. It's a lot more tribal in Europe as far as I can find in some of the readings I've done. But
Well, it used to be a lot more if we mentioned the number earlier, like you said, men take over the education of the child at 7. That's common through many cultures and through many religions.
yep.
That the boys, they are raised by the men from that age specifically. And the raising of the children was done much more communally, even in Europe. Obviously, we weren't as is it bonobos that they're one of us closest relative, and they it's women raising kids there, and that's where our society finds herself right now, and that makes the men weak, both in bonobos and with us, and that can be linked a lot to we're not used to it as a species. Boys were raised by mothers until 7, and then men took over, if not even earlier,
Well,
until
you're always going to be, as a father,
100.
you should always be around the child, obviously, in order to establish the
Yeah,
relationship
the
there.
bond. But I'm talking more about teaching the kid
Right. Yeah, I know.
things, practical aspects. That was done first in the late uh, at 6, 7, 8, when the kids could actually walk and run, could do something even small physically.
Well,
And they have
that's the age in which children develop identity and can differentiate between I and them, essentially. It's also the point in which they start to form actual memories as well. So it's the perfect time, and of course, older societies just knew this because they did a lot of testing. But that's just the age in which children are ready to start becoming adults.
Yeah, it's when they can start being taught some basic things that will keep the society going. Now we teach them that we need to be tolerant. So
Right.
progressive.
The dark age of tolerance. There it goes again. What's up, Eternal Entropy? How you doing? Gonkukan, how you doing, man?
We need the Swedish Captain Progressive sound. Do you remember from Black Pigeon Speaks? Ooh,
Right.
so progressive.
The chat is complaining that you need to get an avatar Tatos, so you'll have to work
I
on
think
that.
I
But
refreshed that to bunch of potatoes. I just think I need to rejoin the call. Let me try refreshing.
well, I think a MGTOW person messaged me and wants to come on, so we'll
Weird.
get him in here once we get through. So let's speed this up just a little bit. I'm just going to run through these a little bit more. We'll try not to tangent too much so we can get to him. So moving on, we talked about the traditional roles and how that works. 4, because of natural selection, humans have been given a set of survival mechanisms that have been refined over countless generations, along with every other animal. To expand on that, these survival mechanisms, from my perspective, include social norms, the creation of religion, language, the usage of tools, the creation of social contracts. This is a more complex one, and the formation of collectives or tribes. All of these tools allowed humans to get where we are today. With language, we can communicate advanced thoughts to one another, which leads to the rise of technology. We can use tools because we're primates. Obviously, this allows us to create fire and to create spears and knives and things like this so that we can hunt, which allows us to get red meat, which allows us to ingest the proteins needed to form a higher functioning brain. And the formation of social contracts is an interesting one, but essentially this is, and we'll talk about more here in a minute, but this allows us to create society and civilization and create a broader social safety net in order to prevent the horrors of nature to overcome us, essentially. You guys have any comments on that?
Well, I am a dirty vegan, so I disagree with the meat being one of the keys. I'm one of the
Well, no,
mutant.
that's a fact. That's a fact.
Well, it depends which studies you talk to, because there are some recent studies that more connect the civilization to the grain itself, and the growing of the brain in like the ape stage of evolution is connected to some genes that are connected to starch digestion. But that isn't important point here.
Yeah. We would talk about that later. But essentially, we humans, like all animals, have developed a set of tools that allow us to get to where we are today. So we can all agree that humans have a whole bunch of survival mechanisms, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, subsection 4A. These survival mechanisms have created what we understand as gender roles because men are created physically stronger, etc. Women have been created to bear the children, etc. Now, this differs between all different types of animals. Some have different ways of procreating. Some of it's asexual. Some of it's the man carries the children, so on and so forth. For humans, there is a specific way in which we operate in order to replicate ourselves. That much we know of. We know of the average. We know of the norm. Any deviation from that is a deviation in evolution, which could be a bad thing, could be a good thing. We'll have to evaluate that when we get to it. But these survival mechanisms between the sexes are meant to work in tandem in order to produce successful offspring, or at least to try. This goes back to point 3.
Yep.
You won't get much disagreement here.
That's
There's
good.
a reason we have the ways of raising the kids we have, and it's because it's tried and true to hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And we can see the same thing in our closest relatives, chimpanzees. They have pretty much similar system, and they live in a more environment that could be more compared to ours than bonobos, for example. I don't think there is much to add here. And evidence from biological point of view, perfectly supports that point.
I mean,
I'm waiting.
the only thing I would say is that I know leftists like to use different forms of media like Harry Potter and stuff like that to justify their political ideology.
Oh, cuck alert, cuck alert.
but but I don't know if I think any of you two have played the new God of War, but there's a scene that really stood out to me. It's Kratos gets down on his hands and knees in front of his son Atreus, and he's trying to teach him how to control his anger. And he says to him, he's like, "Try to punch me in the face," basically. And he holds up his hands, and every time Atreus tries to like just swing at him and hit him in the face, he bats his hands away. And then over time, the kid gets more and more angry and starts throwing the punches more, just not even caring, just trying to throw him out more aggressively. And he gets out of the way, and then the kid falls to the fucking floor. And he uses it as like a way to show that like you have to get your anger under control to be able to use it appropriately and stuff like that. And it really stood out to me because that's what a man should be doing to his son, who, and Atreus is in that age range of 7 to 10 or whatever, which is something that's been lost. We don't really teach especially our sons, number one, any sort of survival. We don't teach them how the world works, anything like that. The whole evolutionary societal doctrines that we've come to know throughout all of our history that has been recorded is getting completely thrown to the fucking wind because we don't have any, like, especially nowadays, men are spending 8 to 14 hours at work. They're not even at home with their fucking kids, and then when they get home, they're too damn tired to even do anything with their kids. Like, what happened to even just going outside playing ball, just throwing the ball around?
Yeah, and the thing is, and now that people have lied to women and told them that they have to enter the workplace, and they've inflated the currency, and your buying power is essentially zero in comparison to how it used to be, forcing women into the workplace for some environments. There's no parental interaction with the children. So,
well, we basically were. I don't know if we were convinced to drop all the lessons that have been learned by our ancestors, because they were evil, racist white males for most part. And
bring back the patriarchy.
Obviously, property doesn't get to vote. Don't you know? No, like, we rejected the lessons we have managed to write down for last 3,500 years, because some of the cultures had slavery, some of them killed each other. All of what used to be accepted 150 years ago, even, it's all rejected now, because that's not how human beings are supposed to be. That's evil, that's bad, whatever mumbo jumbo the left wants to use to get us to forget the lessons we have learned so painstakingly.
So let's move on a little bit. We can talk about parental action a little bit later, but this is where we're going to start diverging a little bit. Number 5, the history of the Western world shows that monogamous long-term relationships produce the best offspring on average. And to expand on this, you would not be able to conquer half the world if not for a strong family unit that raises successful offspring. Same goes for every other culture that had significant conquest or empire. Just look at how they organized their society. It was in a very traditional way. Now, this doesn't mean that everything was perfect and that there was no infidelity or things like that. Of course there was. We're human beings. But the principle at hand here is that this tactic, this survival mechanism, has been employed for a very long time, and we see the fruits of that labor.
I agree.
Yep.
It's shown through our written history in Europe, especially. Almost no matter what happened between the parents, they still start to stay together for the sake of the child, unless we want to talk about the dirty Anglos and their Protestant religion that's all about, I wanted some new poon this weekend.
Yeah. So 5A, This is a subsection of 5. Thus, the traditional nuclear family, for lack of a better, more refined term, is actually the best mechanism in which humans, and from my perspective, Europeans in particular, can ensure the survival and success of the species. Now, expanding on that to explain a little bit, the term nuclear family is a bit of a stretch. This is the most commonly found and originated in the United States in the 1950s and 60s. It has more of a focus on the individual family unit rather than the collective as a whole. I use the term because it is most commonly known as representing a single father-mother household. I would want, ideally, for it to be more collective or community-focused family structure on top of that previous dynamic. Does that make sense?
Yes, I would agree. I think that like the grandparents especially should be more involved.
Exactly.
It has been completely disconnected because of how fast the technology has been developing for the last hundreds of years. But if we look at the 300 years ago, we are much more connected to the grandparents because they had so much more to teach us.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
The successful tool of the deconstruction of the West is the fact, to the huge effect in my eyes, is the fact that, okay, everything we thought about the working world and the system we live in, it changes basically every 25 years because, okay, first it was what? Information and transport with railroads and all other stuff. Then radios, TV, all that changed the way we view things and disconnected us from the families. The truly, like, the best success model is quote unquote the nuclear family with brothers, cousins, more clan-like structure, I think we could call it.
Right. Well, the whole thing is that as I'll use the buzzwords of my opposition, as a collectivist, the family unit is a starting point and is the basis of society, but it needs a grander identity to hold on to. And I'll talk more about that in some other points. But moving on to point 6, because of these naturally selected gender roles, men have a tendency to be object-oriented. Let's expand on that. Yes, I know it's Peterson posting. I get it, but it's true. Look at the jobs that men and women take up when not forced to choose anything else. Women are people-oriented, which is good for raising children and fostering communities. Men, on the other hand, want to use hammers and nails to create things. We were destined to exploit the natural world and bend it for the good of our survival. This is why when women enter the labor force, they tend to be secretaries or nurses. You know this already. Men tend to be engineers, scientists, mathematicians. This does not exclude women from these roles, but on average, they will not pursue them and are not capable of fulfilling these roles. You may also want to read up on the difference in IQ distribution between men and women.
I agree. Like, evolutionary speaking, men evolved to deal with tools and objects, and women evolved to deal with other humans, mostly women, because that's what guaranteed the survival. When men left the tribe to either find something or build something or hunt something, working with objects and brain being programmed to that is much more advantageous than talking. But for women during the day when they were collecting berries or washing or whatever they did, and talking and getting along, that was more advantageous, and that spills into the current modern job market. That's why women prefer to work as kindergarten teachers or nurses or some of the other, we call them easier jobs. And when men prefer to bang a hammer into rocks for 8 hours a day to build something.
Right, exactly. So subsection 6A, this object-oriented worldview drives men to lead, to create, to make war. You can summarize this as the creation of civilization. Now, expanding on that, civilization is many things, but to define it, to get this out of the way, the process by which a society or place reaches an advanced stage of social development and organization. So you need men doing certain things and you need women to do certain things in order to create civilization. Now, point 7 to keep expanding on this, civilization, simply put, is also a survival mechanism. Those men who create stable civilizations also create an environment in which their offspring and their mates are more successful. To expand on that, this goes back to 3B, where I explained the benefits of the family unit. With civilization, you expand upon this and create a social safety net, so to speak, wherein each individual family unit has a network of other family units to rely on in times of hardship. This ensures the health of the collective. This is the strategy in which almost all of humanity has adapted because it works. The humans or proto-humans who did not employ this strategy died out a long time ago. You may also refer to this as the social contract strategy. This is why when I say that the libertarians of the Stone Age aren't around anymore, it's because they didn't get to pass on their genes as an individualist.
Well, the individualists die while the collective from Africa comes with the knives and skins you alive.
Exactly.
Like, that's why I couldn't agree with or join majority of the ideas like Sargon and other individualist spews, because, okay, in the end, I get to develop myself as much as I want, but if that means that 20 other guys just kill me and take what I made, what I was working for myself, and they take it, what's the benefit?
Right. And to address a criticism here in the chat, Sivard says safety net eventually ends up creating weakness. Not necessarily. It depends on what kind of safety net it is. Just a bare minimum safety net, just to keep the whole goddamn machine running, is all you need. You don't need to give people free money. You don't need to hand out things to people. You could refer to my right-wing socialism video if you want to. It's the bare minimum. Like, even a social safety net can just be getting advice from the mother across the street that already has children. If you're a mother, you're pregnant with your first child, you're scared about something, your husband's away at work, you go across the street, you talk to someone who has more experience with it. That's what the social safety net is. If you take the family unit and you just put them off into the wild, everyone's kind of on their own. Will they survive? Sure. But they may want to take advice from grandparents or the community as a whole. That's why it's important to establish these networks of other family units together as a collective in order to ensure that the civilization stays together as a whole. And yes, Sivert, I'm reading something that I wrote earlier this morning to sort of organize my thoughts. Sorry, I've got some other people that want to join the stream here. Any thoughts on that, guys?
It is interesting to note there's a French sociologist who has been contributed to postmodern thought quite a bit. Michel Maffesoli. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but the guy he pretty much coined the term neo-tribalism, which he predicted that as the culture and institutions of modernism declined, societies would embrace nostalgia and look to organizational principles of the distant past for guidance, and that therefore the postmodern era would be an era of neo-tribalism. And by and large, he might be on the money for that, because things are tending to lean that way.
Right, and this is why Sargon is wrong about everything, because
pretty much.
Oh, Sargon tries to develop ideology that goes completely against human nature.
These goddamn liberalists.
On the key
They're
points
subverting the UK IP.
Yep.
Do we really care if they do that? The Anglos are the problem, don't you know?
All right. So we're moving on to point 8. We're almost done. Hold your horses. I know the attention span of millennials is low, but we're getting there. In order to maintain, in order to maintain the species and to preserve the survival mechanism that is civilization, humans must procreate and ensure that the new generations carry the torch forwards. So to expand on that, if you enjoy being alive, which is our first principle, and you believe in evolution or natural selection, which is our second principle, you are required, in some sense, to employ the strategies that ensures your survival and the survival of your offspring. This is by no means a guarantee, but why intentionally hamstring yourself or society by abandoning what works? And that is what we have done. We have abandoned what works.
Exactly. Just with this, the economy, we could say, decided that just focusing on ourselves and what's good for us, it's not good for some of the people that want to make money. That's the way I view like the modern society is. We used to work so our country or our province or our state had it the best, because if our state in general had it the best, the future of our kids and our people was secured. And now it's just all about I need money to secure my future.
Right. So let's finish off here with the final principle that I've done so far, and that's point number 9. Our sole biological imperative is to maintain those survival mechanisms that allow us to be successful genetically, both procreation and civilization and all the other ones that we spoke about. So to conclude this, the only meaning in life that can be ascertained from biology is the creation of offspring. Now, I, of course, and many people here believe in higher ideals than the base materialistic thinking like this and reject the hopeless nihilism of most atheists. But the fact of the matter is, the one thing that all life has in common is the will to replicate. It is found in every form of life, or what we consider life at our current understanding.
Yep.
Welcome, Chaos Dionysia, to the stream. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm good. I just had a couple of thoughts. One about the monogamy, and also about how the 50s, probably part of it, made the 60s. And the first one is that one of the issues with monogamy, even though I'm supporting it, is that if you have women who like the top men, it doesn't really matter how good the majority of men are. There's still going to be a lot of women wanting a few men. And so I think that when you have a situation like the 50s, where you have a lot of men that have gotten out of the war, that's going to be attractive to women. You got a lot of men that are making good money. That's going to be attractive to women. But I still think there was a dissatisfaction, because they found themselves in a situation where monogamy is not natural to women. In a primitivist state and more in the modernist state, you find women clustering towards the top men, and when we enforce that, it makes them unhappy. And I think that what happened in the 50s is that a lot of low status men were in these monogamous relationships, and the women started to resent the men, and the men started to either retreat from participation in the family, or they would become abusive towards the kids or the wife. I think that those sort of toxic relationships probably created the kind of free spirit, love everybody 60s. And the only other thing that I would say, that's the first point. The second is that I'm not really sure if there's a way that you can solve that, because if you allow women to be polygamous, it's going to cause chaos. And if you force them to be monogamous, it's going to cause resentment. It's going to create more like the 60s. So how do you think that we can deal with that?
Well,
Gotcha.
Oh, you want to take that?
Yeah. Let me throw some thoughts out there real quick. First of all, the reason why we had a de-evolution in the relationship between the sexes is mainly because in the United States, we entered into a Gilded Age, and a very materialistic one at that. And this comes from personal experience, listening to how my grandparents treated my mother when she was growing up. It was not about it was not about culture or religion or values or anything like that. It was purely based on material possessions. And this, I think, created a lot of the counterculture as well, where they were not so focused on the big shiny cars with fins on the back. They didn't want the big house necessarily. They just wanted to be a part of something greater than themselves, which coalesced into the hippie movement. I think that's one of the thousands of things that caused the Depression era in the 60s. The other thing is that, yes, monogamy does cause this situation where there are a lot of men at the top dominating the sexual market. That, I think, is a good thing, because the alternative is what we have now in theory where everyone's just going around and just you have a woman with 3 baby daddies. Essentially, that's what it is. It's sort of like dysgenics in a way, where the status of men has also changed, where the values of society have also changed. Basically, to be a high status man doesn't necessarily require you to be virtuous or to be physically fit necessarily. A lot of it involves just having money. You have a lot of money, doesn't matter who you are or what you are, nothing. You will get women like crazy. I see that all the time, really. And so the requirements to be a good mate for women is just extremely low compared to what it used to be necessarily, because we had social norms, we had social status amongst men, we had class. We've removed class. That's what the Marxists want, is to remove classes from society. But that is in essence a de-evolution of our species. We've always had class. We've always had hierarchy. That's the naturally occurring mate selection process that women engage in. And the thing is, women drive evolution. They're the ones who select the men. Now, that's subconscious, of course. Men can still control them and say, hey, these are the values we want for society. If you want access to resources, you got to do this, that, or the other. But overall, I think we're better off with a system of hierarchy than the alternative. So go ahead, Mr. Fahrenheit.
Well, yeah, there's a third option here to get letting a woman be polygamous or forcing them to be monogamous doesn't really factor into it. To get autistically libertarian and use the phrases of the MGTOW, in the sexual marketplace, if we were to ideologically change the entirety of the West, it wouldn't matter. It would stir competition, and in order for, that's the thing, men have been conditioned into not being allowed to be a man. So in the ideal world, men would be competitive and compete as men used to in order to lock down a woman, so to say. It would entirely be social. It wouldn't be forced into monogamy. It wouldn't be, nor would it allow for polygamy, because you would have men that would, I mean, even look at the most blue-haired Tumblr dyke. They want a man that will, for a lack of a better phrase, pin their ass down.
And
yeah, and that's, I would just say that, I don't know, I didn't hear, I definitely agree with you guys that it's the ideal solution, but I don't think that that sort of base level really addresses the problem that I was calling attention to, which is that if you have one woman for one man, that's going to pretty much inherently create resentment among women, because they don't, they're gonna realize that they're in a relationship with a man. They're gonna make little reprisals. He's gonna be aware of their animus and their lack of respect for him. And I think that's gonna create a situation where you have low status men that are getting women, and I'm talking about low status relatively, because I don't think it really matters how rich people get, how good their values are, how much they feel they're a part of something greater than themselves. That's all gonna be crucial to developing a civilization. But there is still that inherent problem. So I'm wondering, how do you think you can address that problem of one woman for one man and women not being happy with that?
Well, I think it goes back to the value discussion we had. Go ahead, Mr. Fahrenheit.
Well, because men would be inherently challenging themselves and continually trying to climb the social ladder higher and higher up, and they would at the same time be commanding respect from their woman. There wouldn't be any of this animus.
The other thing, of course, is that when women compete with one another, the same thing happens. They continuously improve each other through competition. In order to gain a mate back in the day, you had to be a pretty decent woman. You couldn't just have 3 kids from 3 different dads and then expect to get married. That's just not how it worked. So there is this expectation that men and women have to meet in order to form this pair bond. I think a lot of that has been
absolutely
lost. A lot of women don't think that they think that men can't have any expectations whatsoever towards them. If you want a woman with blonde hair and a certain waist size, that's horribly oppressive, and you can't do that.
Misogynistic.
Yeah. Welcome to the stream,
Yeah.
MGTOW Values. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing quite well. Thank you very much for having me on. And I must say that it's quite a pleasure to hear intelligent men talking. I really do appreciate this, and you're making great sense. I like the structure of your situation. It reminds me of Ludwig Wittgenstein, the early, and it all sounds very good.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate it. So basically what we've been talking about, and this is not necessarily an attack on the ideas of the red pill, realizing that women are hypergamous and that they are victims to their own nature, things like that. We recognize that. The thing that we disagree on necessarily are the solutions that MGTOW brings to the table. And yes, I generalize a lot, but that's for a good reason, because I can't seem to find anyone else who breaks out of that typical MGTOW philosophy. So if there's something you want to bring up, a topic or something that you'd like to talk about, feel free.
Well, I was just going to offer myself for any questions, but I'm just going to say MGTOW doesn't offer solutions. Perhaps in some way you're the solution that MGTOW offers. You're going your own way. And MGTOW just warns men about the system. Now that you're trying to build it up based upon biology, and evolutionary biology is all well and good. And if you can find some way to make it safe for you to actually implement this system, that would be, again, well enough and well and good. But currently the situation is that if you try to implement any of these things we're talking about inside the West, that woman can still defect on you, phone the police, and the police come in, and all that evolutionary biology making sense is thrown out the window, and you're, paying alimony and child support. You don't get to see your kids, and God only knows what's happening to them.
Right. And believe me, those criticisms are valid. I hate the legal system. I hate what women are capable of doing to men today. The issue is that there is no going your own way as a man, from my perspective, because you have been endowed with this very unique ability to lead, to create things, and to organize society. Like I said in my video yesterday, if men wanted to, we could build whatever society we wanted to and completely subjugate women. Now,
go for it, then
yeah,
you can try to go for that, and people are going to block you.
Right. That's. I'm just saying, like, as a fact of reality, if we.
So that's your.
You cut out there.
You cut out there.
Now, that's not the solution necessarily, which I think is what he was getting to.
Well,
that is just the.
Men.
Say again?
It's a return to the strength of men, and men making their own decision. And so in the West currently, everything you're saying is not viable currently. In some future time, it may be. And at that point, I don't see the problem. But currently there's a problem, and MGTOW is advising men not to take risks that don't provide a value.
Right. And so that future that you're waiting on is not going to happen if you don't take action. Because, like I said, power, especially institutional power, is never created or destroyed. It is simply transformed into something else.
And MGTOW has been transformed into you young men.
Sure.
See how it works?
Right, but by not forming relationships with women,
towards that battlefield, and saying, don't go out there unless you look first. Try doing something else. Pull back and try doing that. So I don't think MGTOW is going to attack you men, but we are still going to wish for you men not to advise other men to do things that would put them in danger, immediate danger.
Well, that's the thing.
Years,
that's the thing.
10 years. Yeah, sorry.
But as a man, that's why you were created the way you were created, is to go into the face of danger and change things. That's the kind of duty that I see men having, because if not you, then who?
Okay.
No one else is capable of doing it.
Now, on some of my videos and on my page, I recall World War I, where the general sent the men death against machine gun fire. And so it was atrocious.
You're cutting out a bit for me, at least.
Force
Could you
rate.
repeat?
I know where you're getting with this, and that's all.
So we
Yeah.
go with statistics. So we're going with statistics because we can't see the whole situation from our specific point. So we're looking at the statistics and saying we're not going to be a general to order those men out of the trenches. So yes, you have a purpose. You have this purpose to MGTOW are not anti-natalist. Maybe on the edges or something, but no. And so, yes, there is this drive, this will to reproduce, this will to move into the future. However, currently, that is it has a net negative value. And so, are you willing to sacrifice yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Because I have higher ideals, and I'm willing to sacrifice myself for.
Then what you have done is you have placed a child in the care of a single mother, and that statistically is a crime, as 60% of them wind up in great trouble. So what have you done? You have just defeated your whole evolutionary biology by placing 60% of the offspring into desperate situations. Boys are under attack in schools.
Why is there a higher rate of divorce now? Why is there a higher rate of single motherhood now? It's not because men just went off and sacrificed themselves necessarily. It's a multitude of factors. One of them has been a change in culture.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. MGTOW is pointing this out. The reasons why we came here, they're well explicated, and then there's differences, but for the main, we see it. It started in 1848 with the Seneca Falls, and it's moved forward, and men throw men under the bus and women throw men under the bus, and it's just crazy right now. So just don't throw yourself under the bus. That you do have a greater purpose is fine, but that you are sacrificing yourself while defeating your ultimate purpose, which is to have kids who are strong and well educated and happy, that makes no sense to MGTOW. It makes more sense to find a different path, whatever that path may be.
Mind if I shoehorn myself in here?
Sure.
If we were you say that sacrificing yourself defeats the purpose because you leave a child in the hands of a single mother. If we look at that, we shouldn't exist. Humanity should have died out thousands of years ago because men have been sacrificing themselves literally to death on the battlefield for
yes, that's right. And so my video discussing Andromache, detailed by Homer at the end of the Trojan War, she was a spoil of war, and she hypergamated at the end of that battle. She married the man whose friend killed her husband, and he killed her son in front of her. And she married him, and she gave him 3 sons. So yes, we are aware of the problems in the past and how women hypergamate and how that hypergamy is necessary.
So basically, that person, that soldier that went out and died to a better soldier, I assume, is now a genetic dead end. But the other person who went out and fought now has 3 sons with a woman. Right. That's how the world used to work. This sort of risk management, while yes, you should understand the risks of getting married, you should understand how women operate and how you need to interact with them as a man, obviously. But just getting rid of relationships as a whole is going to lead to an even worse situation in which those weaker men who do procreate are going to end up becoming the next generation. They're the ones having the children. They're the shitty parents are producing the shitty children right now. So if you have good quality men of character who turn MGTOW, which is what I'm afraid of, they're not going to be passing on their genes. And it's essentially dysgenics at that point. That's what I'm afraid of.
Well, it's dysgenics now, and apparently nothing can stop the system. And so, the system is going to collapse. It looks like it, or it may not. It may heal itself, but it looks like it's going to collapse. And so the point is, for the short term, stand back and gain resources and strength, and then wait for the time and the place where you think you can gain maximum benefit and shoot for it.
Well, so, can I just get in here? What do you mean by stand back? What does that even mean?
It means don't rush into things. And so if you're a 20-year-old man, you don't have to get married. You can wait much longer. And you say 3 or 4 years difference. No, it can be 10 or 12. It doesn't matter. A 40-year-old man and a 20-year-old woman is perfectly acceptable. The man is now looking quite good, and he's got some resources and he's got some experience. So there's no problem even with that.
But I mean, from the average person, like if I'm giving advice to a young person, I would say shoot for cultivating a family earlier so that you don't run out of time, essentially. It's fine if a 40-year-old wants to marry a 22-year-old. I don't particularly care so long as their relationship is productive for society. But on average, the average person needs to start looking at cultivating a family at a younger age than what we're currently experiencing, because we have this every year past 30 that women have children.
But at this point, it's too dangerous. It's just vastly too dangerous. Okay, so you get to have kids, and the mother, takes the kids from you. Okay, your genes are out there, but it doesn't matter. Nurture and nature is we haven't figured it out. It's not all genetics. It doesn't matter. In my classes, it wasn't what we would say would be the highest gene pool in my logic class who were making the A+. No, anyone could, right? So nurture is something.
Sure, but like I said, I think we're jumping a little bit ahead. Yes, obviously divorce is a risk, but we have to go back and evaluate why the divorces are happening, what has happened to women, what has happened to men, and how can you prevent it? I put this in a comment earlier. If you know what social framing is, and if you hold frame with a woman, and if you interact with them in a specific way, if you are worthy of respecting because you respect yourself, you are physically strong, you're mentally capable, all of these things, it makes women change essentially, and they will begin to respect you. And I have never had a relationship with a woman that I hear in any of these horror stories, because I've always been worthy of respect. I learned that from a young age, thanks to this sort of TRP, or the red pill community.
Yeah.
This has reduced my risks substantially of having any threat of divorce. Obviously, the threat is still there, but for me, I look at the alternative, which is I die alone, and it's not favorable to me. So I'm willing to run that risk because I believe in myself. I respect myself. I think I'm capable of having this relationship without that threat kind of looming over my head. You're cutting out.
But you look at the top value men out there. We just saw Robin Williams kill himself because of alimony, death. And John Schneider,
he had mental health problems.
No, he did not. He was perfectly sane.
No, dude, he had a cocaine addiction. He was hooked on meth for a couple of years.
Everyone did cocaine when he did it, and he got off when everyone else got off. No, that's a picture that someone's painting. He had to pay out more money in alimony than he was able to make, and he just said that's enough, and that's it. So yeah, it was whitewashed or whatever it was. You look into it a bit more and don't believe the mass media. He didn't have those problems. He was just like the rest of us. Now I'm 54. I grew up with Robin Williams, and I knew what he was doing, and everyone did.
Of course, right? But that was my whole point. My point was, if you look into the psychology of Robin Williams and what he had to deal with on top of that drug addiction, there were signs of mental health issues. He had constant depression. He had feelings of insecurity.
No, I never met the guy, and I never had enough information to get all of that.
He talked about it openly, that he had these mental health issues.
Yeah, that was just the thing, friggin' alimony, probably, because otherwise he wouldn't have had all this stress. He was,
Well, that seems like a cop-out, because these mental health issues don't necessarily. Sure, you can get depressed if you're being sucked dry by a woman. Sure, but if you look at his past, even before he was married, he was already talking and showing the signs for these things.
And there's
a video.
He's gone. And there's countless others. And you're young. You're looking good. I don't know. What are you, 25 or something? The women you meet are also young and idealistic, and this is very well and good. But they will change, and They will defect on you, regardless of the to the.
All right. Well, let me throw out a
And
personal
there's plenty of
anecdote.
examples. So, I may be jumping ahead. The reasons why the system is as
Your mic's cutting out there, buddy.
I'm not
Here,
catching almost anything he says.
1300. It's a removal of the power of men, and that you men are taking back power is excellent. I'm going to leave you here just on the idea that MGTOW, it's men going their own way, and this is one of the way men can go. What you're doing here, figure it out, figure a way forward. You never know when it's going to be useful.
Sure, and that's productive. Yeah, that's fine.
It's
But
definitely productive.
too often I see going their own way to mean being a hedonist or a materialist. That's my fears, because that's very prevalent in this scene.
No, it's just something people do at the beginning. They got no money, so it's good for them to get a little ahead. Once they got some money, they move on to other things, right? Everything should be balanced.
Just browsing the manosphere, it seems to be that's the advice that a lot of these older divorced men tend to give younger men. Nah, don't do what I did. Just go out there and cultivate yourself and things like that. And then they keep that. And now we haven't seen the end results of MGTOW necessarily because it hasn't been long enough. But I'm predicting that if enough men follow this path, there will be a decline in society, a significant one, already worse than what we're seeing today.
Oh, no, you're seeing the worst of it. I'm just going to give you guys a little heads up. Now, what I said so far, I believe to be standard MGTOW. I'm well regarded generally in the community, but I am an outlier. I am an expat MGTOW. I left the West in 1997 because of everything that you men have pointed out. I am married. I have kids. Got it? I'm safe.
Right,
No
you're safe.
defecting.
But that selfish desire to be safe has led to the ruin of civilization.
I could.
I mean, just imagine if you took these ideas into the public space today in the Western world and actually stood up there and fought for higher ideals like what we're doing.
No, there was no talk of it back then. This was who was the first guy? Warren Farrell. His book came out the year after I left, or maybe the year before I left. I never heard of it. I didn't even hear of the MRA when I left.
Yeah, that's fine. Hindsight is 2020. I'm saying in general to the people who are listening here today.
Oh yeah, the people who are listening. Yeah. Sure, if you want to fight there, that's what I'm doing here. I'm encouraging men to fight. The first thing to do is not to put yourself in jeopardy. The second thing to do is to gain strength, however that strength is, and look at your situation. Third thing is don't take risks without value. There, that's it. And there's many different opportunities. I don't recommend my route to anyone, but you never know. It may be out there. Anyway, best of luck. And MGTOW is short term. We're triage. Leave us alone. It's bloody and it's messy where we are. Okay?
All right.
Anyway.
Thanks for coming on, man. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Oof.
Well, that wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. I do agree that it would be better if the MGTOW was short term, but that's not how it ends up, right? As soon as you get sucked into a cycle of materialism, it's not very easy to break free from that unless you meet someone very special and your monogamy radar starts going off. But it seems like a lot of projecting failures from his personal life rather than addressing my concerns with replacement populations and dysgenics and why divorce rates are so high, why people like Robin Williams killed himself because he was mentally deficient in a lot of ways. So any thoughts on that, guys? I'm reading the chat right now.
Well, he said
I think it would be easy. I think it would be easy just to say, the MGTOW monk is not one of the good options. The going your own way. I mean, if you can just put an X over a few of the solutions that are floating around in that space, then it's pretty much exactly in line with everything that we're saying.
Well, he said that things aren't they're not as bad as they are as bad as they could be, and in MGTOW there's like two routes that you can go. You can go the monk route or you can go the PUA route. Both routes are a dead end because the monks don't reproduce. They completely opt out, And the PUAs, which everyone in MGTOW likes to parade around these statistics of higher sexual partners leads to a higher chance or higher risk of divorce. Well, what are PUAs doing? They're out there just pumping and dumping women, which is the exact term that they use. So inadvertently, they're ruining women for other men that could have had a chance at reining that woman in and actually having some sort of
Well, like I said in the
decent-
video, they're enabling bad women. As soon as you give a woman attention, you validate her existence and her way of behaving. As soon as I know, like I see the red flags on a woman, if she approaches me, I not only will I neg her, but I will completely reject any and all forms of communication with her from the get-go. And this because women are vain, which is their natural state. They see this as a something I either have to fix or it's a dent in their vanity. And this is a good thing. The more men that dent women's vanity, the better, because they will make a change once they realize that no man wants them in their current state. They will change their behavior based on how men act around them.
Exactly. I mean, whatever we want to say about Stefan Molyneux, I've taken his advice of when you get like your first date, your second date, you start asking a woman her political leanings and stuff like that to see if it's gonna to work. And most people don't even want to breach subjects like that. But for me, I lay my dick completely out on the table. I'm like, listen, I want kids. I want this. I am this. I lay out completely who I am and what I want right from the fucking get-go. So that way I don't waste minimum like 2-3 months on the woman or a couple years. I gauge her response to it. And if it's good, I say, okay, maybe I can invest some time in this. If not, I completely wash my hands of it and fucking I leave.
Date number one. Here's what you do. Okay, you want to set up a date? Here's what you fucking do. If you're meeting them on social media, which I don't necessarily recommend, but if that's the way you want to go, when you're talking to them before you meet, establish boundaries. Say, hey, we're going to go out. I'll pay for my half the bill. We can go Dutch on this if you want. If you're okay with that. If she says no, ditch her. She was never worth it. If she agrees to it, perfect. You've passed the first barricade. If she's needy, that can be a red flag. Wait for it in person. When you get to the date, don't be afraid to talk a little bit about politics, a little bit about where they view the future. In fact, this is a great opener for conversation is ask about their higher ideals. Where do they see themselves in 5 years? What do they want to do with their lives? What are they currently doing with themselves? If you can establish that she meets all of your requirements by answering those questions, move to a second date. If not, pay your half the bill and leave as soon as possible. Don't waste your fucking time with these people. I have paid my tab and walked out in the middle of plenty of dates because the women I met were not worth it. I'm not going to waste a single second with these worthless women that aren't worth my time. My time is incredibly valuable to me when I could be out there earning money or talking to you, wonderful people. I'm not going to waste it on some dumb whore that doesn't deserve my time and money.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. That's pretty much exactly what I do as well. I mean, the woman that I've been talking to, like the second or third week I was talking to her, I started asking her like completely philosophical questions out of the blue, like, what do you see as the problems of modernity and civilizational caustic things that could implode and stuff like that, to really pick her brain. And she would give a thought, and I'd say go deeper than that and try to see where she is at. Intellectually, and to see if it's something that I can work with.
Did you ask the most important question? Did Hitler did anything wrong?
I don't think he realized what he was getting into. Yeah.
Well, she'd probably say no to that answer.
Well, that's something that you bust out, 4 years into marriage. But
third date.
No, I'm just kidding.
You need a pair of brass ones. Just ask it on the third date.
No, that's your cold opener right there. When you approach a woman at the bar, just ask them, "Hey, did Hitler do anything wrong?"
No, just show off the swastika tattoo on the heart. Do you like it?
There you go. Bust out the wallet picture of Hitler.
But yeah, that's the
body
difference
pillow
between.
Hitler chan.
But that's the difference between us and MGTOW. We're teaching men, or trying to at least, how to engage with women where they're at and how to identify a woman that's worth their time. MGTOW completely washes their hands of it and says, fuck all of them.
Well, some of them actually do give pretty decent dating advice, but what matters is what you do when you get that date. Most of them seek, okay, you're trying to fuck as soon as possible. That's not the be all end all of a relationship from the traditionalist perspective. It's, is this woman worth my time? Will she be a valuable asset to my little empire that I've got going on? Will she make a good mother? Those types of things. And, also at the same time, it has to be someone that you can tolerate, someone that's a companion, because if you get annoyed by your wife, you're more likely to be abusive, and that is not conducive to successful offspring. So
Yep.
any
If we
other
can tie
thoughts?
that back.
Sure.
Well, if we can tie that back, the sort of nuclear family. I heard you talking about it. I missed most of the beginning of the stream, but the nuclear family, and you were saying a couple of things along with. What's that?
I was going to say, so we're going to wrap up the stream here in a few minutes.
Oh.
I'll go through the principle list again that we started at the beginning of the stream, and then you want me to go through that, and then you can go in, because we talked about the nuclear family quite a bit.
Sure. Yeah, real quick.
Okay. So I'll go through this. So these are the 9 principles or axioms that we're working from, whatever you want to call them. Number 1, nature necessitates the creation of offspring for a species to survive. 2, evolution and natural selection are real. Those who procreate determine the future of the species. 3, the offspring of the human species are born weak and defenseless and take between 13 and 18 years to mature. 3a, this necessitates that for successful offspring, parents must stay with and raise the children for many years. 3b, over time, the most successful humans have been pair-bonded long-term mates with an emphasis on the nurturing of their offspring. 4, because of natural selection, humans have been given a set of survival mechanisms that have been refined over countless generations. 4a, these survival mechanisms have created what we understand as gender roles because men are created physically stronger, etc. Women have been created to bear children, etc. 5, the history of the Western world shows that monogamous, long-term relationships produce the best offspring on average. 5a, thus the traditional nuclear family, for lack of a better, more refined term, is actually the best mechanism in which humans, and from my perspective, Europeans, can ensure their survival and the success of the species. 6, because of these naturally selected gender roles, men have a tendency to be object-oriented. 6a, this object-oriented worldview drives men to lead, to create, to make war, summarized thus, the creation of civilization. Number 7, civilization, simply put, is also a survival mechanism. Those men who create a stable civilization also create an environment in which their offspring and mates are more successful. 8, in order to maintain the species and to preserve the survival mechanism that is civilization, humans must procreate and ensure that the new generations carry the torch forwards. Number 9, the concluding statement, our sole biological imperative is to maintain those survival mechanisms that allow us to be successful genetically, both procreation, civilization, and all of the rest of them. Now, if you're just tuning in and you're curious about some expanded thoughts on this, tune back to the very beginning of the stream. We talked in depth and expanded on all of these ideals. So go ahead, Chaos.
There's just one aspect of that I don't think it was addressed, and I think that the Industrial Revolution, so what it saw the increasing or the decreasing influence of men over the family, because if a man is at a factory all day working and then he comes home and then he's tired, he's not actually participating. And that's what I was kind of getting at with the 50s creating the 60s. When you have men not fathering their children, you're obviously going to get children who aren't men. And so I think that whatever solution that wasn't addressed within those 9, it has to include an aspect of like the old style of parenting where a man would teach his son whatever trade he's in, and spend a lot of time. Like he was an actual mentor. He wasn't just a breadwinner.
Right. Well, I mean, this has been common that men are outside the household since the dawn of humanity. Men used to go off for months at a time and fight in wars, and they may not even come back. And yet children were raised successfully. One of the things, the community aspect of this is that if a man goes off for a significant amount of time, the child still has other men to look up to, usually grandparents or uncles or brothers, things like that. Now, the industrial workplace where men are gone 12 hours a day and they come home and they're dead exhausted, yes, that is a problem. Sorry, that is an after effect of industrialization. But it's always been the case since the dawn of humanity that fathers are separated from their children in order to go out and earn resources. It's very hard to have a crying baby strapped to your back if you're trying to stealthily hunt mammoths on the tundra, right? So that's the reason why women exist, is to maintain the children until the children get to a certain age in which they can finally self-identify and begin the early stages of adulthood at around 7 years old, like we talked about. And then at that point, it's the responsibility of men to, as much as possible, instill value, teach sons how to hunt, the ways of war, things like that, essentially. But I think you could be right on some accounts, and on other accounts, I would disagree.
Well, I'm
Yeah,
a bit of a. Go ahead.
I would just say that I think the problem with the term nuclear family is that it denotes that particular time in history. And I think that particular setup was problematic because, yes, you would have men go off to war throughout history. But one, war wasn't necessarily the norm. That was, especially in the West. You didn't necessarily have tribal warfare where every man that existed was a soldier. I just don't think that was the norm.
Oh, sure.
And the second thing is that even if they go off to war, in that time there was so little there was so little excess that you were kind of in a position where you had to figure out a way to survive, because if you're on a farm, you have to keep that farm going. So the woman is going to be more is going to be better at managing the farm or doing whatever she needs to do. They're going to, number one, have better or bigger families. So even if some of the men are gone, they have large families. That's one way you can help it. But if you have a man gone consistently and it's the norm, 60 hours a week, 50 hours a week, and he's not mentoring his son in whatever profession he has, I think that's really the issue with the nuclear family. And I think that the solution to that would be not a deindustrialization, but just a sort of a different sort of culture than the 50s, where public school, I don't really think that's a good idea. You don't want to put your kids in other people's hands for 8 hours a day while you're at work 8 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And if you have a situation where people are learning what they need to learn, I mean, this would kind of tie into your thoughts on monarchy, and the best ruler is the ruler that has been born and bred for it. If you have men that are learning something from very young age, instead of just going to school and getting the standard textbooks, you're going to have people that are being brought into the world and prepped and groomed all the way into adulthood, rather than just relying on a woman to take care of them while they're at home and the school to take care of them while they're at school.
Right. Yeah, and that's all fair, but I think some of it may be missing the point slightly. I like the old American system of the one-room schoolhouse with mixed ages and things like that. I like homeschooling, but at the same time, I think public education can be a good thing so long as it's in a nationalistic country that can instill national values into the children. I think that'd be a more positive thing. So at the current time, we obviously don't want our children in public school because it's so disgusting and degenerate and things like that. But in an ideal situation, yes, we would want some kind of public school where at least children can learn the values of the nation. They can learn things that perhaps their parents can't teach them. They can also socialize a little bit. They can get out there with people within their age range, 3 to 4 years, whatever. So I wouldn't throw the whole thing out right from the get-go. But
Well, how long do you think that could go on? Because I think the main problem is that it goes on until people are 18. You know, if you have people learning basic algebra and things until they're 12, that's fine. But if then they're spending their young adulthood doing the same things, rather than, learning how to work instead of just learning, and do something practical, I think that's the issue.
Yeah, that's the issue with the public education system as it stands. And I talked with Cultured Thug about how we can improve the state education system in our second series of videos that we did together here on the channel. And essentially, we would overhaul the public education system completely. The current standard for what we're teaching our children is so goddamn low and so unpractical because it's an egalitarian system which says that everyone has to learn this, they're all capable of doing this, you just got to throw more money at it. I want practical skills to be taught to people. I wouldn't necessarily want the school to be, boys only or girls only, but maybe the classrooms be gender separated or something like that. That's another conversation entirely, but yeah, the public education system needs a complete rework. And I don't know how we get there necessarily until we take back culture and politics.
Well, the issue isn't how long you're in school, it's about how early you start in school. I mean, in preschool, you're there at 3 to 4 years old. Back in the one-room church endorsed schooling, the kids didn't go there unless they were able to walk there by themselves, which normally happened around 5, 6, 7 years old. Mostly because the towns were smaller back then too. But when you're that young and you're gone for half a day, especially from your parents, we already sort of touched on it. It creates a sort of abandonment syndrome. But I'm from the sort of a prepper area. I would ideally like to have 50 to 100 acres and have a ranch and stuff like that and be completely self-sufficient one day. But back on when humans sort of at the agricultural revolution and we had farms and stuff like that we had to run, the man wasn't but maybe a 10-minute walk from the house. So if his kids or his wife needed him, he was right there. Now you're sometimes 40, 50 miles away for 12 hours a day, and then you have an hour drive back and forth from work, and over time it stacks up. You're completely gone from your children.
Correct. Yeah, there needs to be a separate discussion on this in its entirety. Any concluding statements from Tato's Fahrenheit Chaos? Anybody?
Nothing really. Thank you for a nice talk. That's it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to close it there. Chat, if you have any final questions, remember you can find me and everybody else here in the Discord in the description down below if you want to talk to us one-on-one or join the conversations on there. It's a lot of fun. But if you have any questions, post them in the chat here. Let's see if I missed anything. Home economics, how to beat your wife 101. The classics. Yes, thank you, Tato's. Those are the vocations.
Well, Russia just legalized that.
Well, they decriminalized it just a little bit in order to give power back to men just a little bit.
The one-handed pimp slap.
Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. asks, who was Odin, Mimir? Good question. It depends on the context. Do you mean in a religious context or in a societal context? Odin or Wotan or whatever name you want to give it, to me, it's the embodiment of the fatherly figure, wise, seeking knowledge, reserved, that type of thing. He was also a god of war in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yep.
A god of poetry and a god of war.
Yeah, he is masculinity embodied, as far as I'm concerned.
He's the example of men sacrificing part of himself to gain wisdom. The tail with the eye, for example.
Yep. Stabbing himself to Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights. Eyeball out.
Yeah.
Mimir, would you like to answer the question?
No, I'm good. I think I'll use a stick instead.
You plead the fifth.
No, don't beat your wife, you fucking degenerates. We're not savages here. We don't abuse our families.
It's
Sand
not
Tiger
abuse,
says
it's a lesson.
it's the amalgamation of the archetypes of wisdom, courage, and authority. Yeah, pretty much. Very good marriage. If you raise your hand at your Froya, I think he was joking.
To be honest, I don't think my wife would have a choice. Let's be honest.
Oh God, this is turning into a luxurious stream.
Just taking some couple jabs. Relax.
Too often does the woman question come in contact with the Sharia question. So
Oh, come on. Property doesn't have voting rights, so we don't care what they do.
well, that's true. I can't say that I can argue against that, but don't tell the women's. You'll scare them off.
Once I come to power, will it really matter?
It was
True.
an accident, officer. She tripped and fell down the stairs.
3 times. Up and down.
Jesus Christ.
I
that's
swear,
awful.
I have knives on my staircase. Honest accident, officer.
Celtic National says, what do you guys think is the best way to meeting good women? Honestly, even as a non-Christian, go to church, man. Find single women at church. I know it's kind of awkward, but become part of the congregation and you'll find fairly decent women, better than if you went to a club or a bar. Social media isn't too bad. You just gotta have higher standards on social media. It's kind of the cop-out way of meeting women, but just go out there in life. Go to local festivals, go to events, go to musical shows that aren't completely degenerate, and you will come across a good woman at some point. If you're stuck in the city, you may consider moving to the countryside or to a smaller town. Generally, from my experience, the women in smaller towns are much higher quality because they're not constantly fed attention by the city around them, essentially.
I would just like to say your chat is not tolerant. They want to fry me. What is
Fried
this?
potatoes.
What is this? You boil them, mash them, don't you know? Sam taught us in the Lord of the Rings.
Oh, that sounds really good. I'm gonna go make some lunch. But anyway, so we're gonna close out the show there. Thanks everybody for coming on. Now I'm hungry for potatoes. But anyway, goodbye everybody.
Goodbye.
Later.
Okay. Have a good one.